Joining us, host of the Fast Politics podcast and MS Now political analyst Molly Jong-Fast, managing editor of The Bulwark and MS Now contributor Sam Stein, former RNC communications director and Republican strategist Doug Heye, and former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner. Doug, why? Why all the misinformation?
Well, clearly they feel that this is an issue that's going to benefit them. I don't like this rhetoric. I don't like this rhetoric when it comes from Republicans or Democrats. And I say that as somebody who participated in the Florida recount in 2000 in the Brooks Brothers revolt, which I'm still proud of doing. I don't like tearing down our system and denigrating it to where people don't have trust in it. And we've seen this happen for a long time. Trump has put this on overdrive. And I think the ultimate result here for the country is a negative one, even if I support things like voter ID. And I say that as somebody who's been in polling sites throughout the country, being a poll watcher, going hour and after hour to see who showed up to vote and who hasn't, so we can then have our campaigns call people and say, get out and vote now.
All right. So, Molly, then I'll ask you, too. Why?
Because Trump has seen the polling, right? I think this started when he lost the election. I remember that quote of the Republican senator who said, right, anonymously, who said, let him play golf, let him say the election was rigged, he's not going to do anything. I mean, good people have gone along with this. Republicans who know it's not true, have gone along with it long enough so that they have created a monster, so that kind of anti-democratic rhetoric has gone on.
So what happens if the election's close, Sam? If the election's a landslide, that's another story, I think. But if the election's any single election, or maybe control for the House is close, or even the Senate is close, what should we expect?
Well, there's two things to look for. One is what happens prior to the election, right? Kristi Noem is hinting at it, but you can see, and you've already seen to a degree, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security making plays to, for instance, take a look at state voter rolls, to have people on the ground at voting locations, to launch investigations into fraudulent accusations of fraud. That's the pre-vote element. Then there's the post-vote element, which is, are they going to try to have a federal presence in the counting of the ballots? Are they going to try to seize ballots? Will they do what you saw Donald Trump try to do in 2020, which is question the sanctity of the results, mire it in litigation, and then have a compliant House Speaker say, well, we can't seat these people until we get to the bottom of this. Those are all real possibilities. I don't think we should treat them as, impossible hypotheticals, because they're openly talking about this stuff and now making moves to actually implement some of these reforms.
What about the bigger impact here, Nina? And that's not just that Republicans might doubt the election. It's that everybody is doubting the election. That number that I just cited, 60% of people don't trust the system. That's bad news.
It is, Katie, but that's exactly what the president wants. I mean, let us not forget, in 2021, the president asked the Secretary of State in Georgia to find him 11,000 extra votes. On the record, said that, setting the play for this moment. He continues even to this day to bemoan the results of the 2020 election, even though he is the sitting president. You know, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And so the Republicans here have a good story. Let's recap just quickly what Secretary Noem said. She said a lot, but these two things struck me. We need to have the right people voting for the right candidates. I mean, if that's not giving a signal that if things don't go the way that they want, meaning no longer should we allow voters to elect the people they want to represent them. We want to let the people who are running select their voters. And so this frenzy. And then my final point, Katie, the stats that you laid out from all kinds of institutes that study this, from more right-leaning ones to more left-leaning ones, have come to the same conclusion. And the Brennan Center's seminal report, The Truth About Voting Fraud, less than 1%. And a lot of the impersonation type fraud that people think is happening is actually due to some type of clerical error, but is non-existent. The Brennan Center went as far to say that an individual voter you have a greater likelihood to be struck by lightning than you do to have people trying to impersonate somebody else when they go to vote.
Why is Kristi Noem even talking about this? What purview, Doug, does she have over elections?
Look, I think it's a very fair question. This is, when we set up the Department of Homeland Security, it was a reaction to 9/11, 2001, and really about protecting all of our safety. It wasn't about elections, and I don't think this is proper for the Secretary to have this role.
I think that Wall Street Journal piece, remember, there was a Wall Street Journal piece out on Friday, which was a very dishy piece with a lot of...
Josh Dawsey piece, we had him on, yeah.
Right, and it talked about
Her missing blanket.
The missing blanket, the fired pilot, all sorts of dysfunction and a lot of problems within the agency. It also talked about how after the second killing of a United States citizen, she went to the Oval Office to have a visit with Trump, a 2-hour visit, and she's trying. Remember, you see members of this administration do things like this when they want to win back favor with Trump.
To get on his good side.
Right, because
she knows that this is an issue that he cares about, and she wants to get out in front of it, even though she has no authority over it.
Well, we saw Tulsi Gabbard do that recently, and she has no authority over that.
Let's talk about voter ID. Doug just mentioned it at the top. Nina, Democrats, by the way, when you poll Democrats, they want voter ID too. 71% of Democrats say they support it. 83% of all registered voters. There are arguments that it would lead to suppression, and there are studies where it's created confusion in certain states, but there's broader studies that say they don't actually stop voters from voting, and this is from the National Bureau of Economic Research, did a big study on it from 2008 to 2018. So it's one of those issues that comes up a lot, and there's knee-jerk reactions to it. That being said, there's not voter fraud. So, I mean, I get the idea of wanting voter ID. I understand it on a gut level. I get it. But it also, and Doug, I'll get you to weigh in on this as well. But Nina, it's addressing a problem that does not exist according to the data. Yeah.
That's right. It's a solution in search of a problem. Again, this is to work the American people up into a frenzy. This is the ultimate goal of President Trump and others who are thinking like him. In my great state of Ohio, if people don't have they have various types of IDs or various types of documents that one can bring to the polling place to prove that they are who they are. What the SAVE Act does is it turns this upside down. In other words, I have to prove that I am an American citizen, because that's really what they're getting down to, versus the government taking the requisite IDs and a menu of IDs or different versions of things that you can use to prove that you are who you are, so that you bring more people into the fold and not less. By them narrowing down the types of IDs that are acceptable, then you are shrinking the pool and making it harder. Why do you want to put more hurdles up instead of less? Yes, you only want American citizens or those who are eligible to vote. Are we all clear on that? But why are you making it harder instead of opening it up to make it easier and better for more people who are eligible, more American citizens, to participate in the process?
Doug, I mean, I get this polling data. I get the study done by NBER. But again, the problem's not there. The data shows the problem's not there. Heritage Foundation showed the problem's not there. So why just keep bringing it up? Why are we talking about this?
Because it's overwhelmingly popular with the public. I remember voting here in Washington, D.C. in 2016 and being told, oh, no, you've already voted. And I had to fill out a provisional ballot. Now, it was a clerical error. There was nothing necessarily nefarious going on. But that obviously can be resolved by having some form of an easily obtainable state ID that people show to say that they are who they are. And, we should also remember, as we talk about all of this, it is dramatically easier to vote in the United States today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We have expanded access to polling places. We have early voting. People in the primary in North Carolina are already voting today. It is so much easier to vote in America today than it used to be, and we sometimes lose sight of that.
Is that your argument, that there's more fraud now?
Oh, I didn't say there was more fraud. It's dramatically easier to vote. You can pick your time. You can pick where you show up to vote. It's not just that you show up at Election Day anymore. You don't have to certify somehow that you are absentee, that you're ill, or you're going to be out of town. You can sort of vote whenever you want. That's been a real boon. And also why I question my party sometimes when they go against mail-in balloting. Republicans used to clean house on mail-in balloting, and we should get back to that because it helped us win elections.
Sam, wrap us up before we have to move on.
You know, I think Doug's on to something a little bit here, which is it's very popular ID. I think where Democrats would probably differ with Doug is this notion that it's been dramatically easier to vote in recent decades, maybe in the aggregate, but there are very specific cases where states have taken really proactive steps to restrict the vote, including particularly in Texas, for instance, where you cannot, if you're on a college campus, for instance, you cannot really get clean access to voting locations. Also in North Carolina, there's been pretty aggressive measures by the Republican Party there to try to restrict access to some constituencies to vote. So yes, Doug's right in the aggregate, but I think Democrats look at this and say, if you want to do ID, maybe we'd be okay with it if it wasn't in the larger context of what we feel are attacks from the Republican Party on the franchise.